Hi, it's Miss Parrott again, and we are now on video 12. Today we are going to focus on the role of the church in medieval Europe. This information is also attached to Google Classroom, the Medieval Europe Time Book, and this is chapter 3 in History Alive. So all the information that I'm sharing with you today, that's where you can find it. So let's start with talking about just how powerful the church was. So between 1000 and 1350 AD, the church gained quite a bit of power in medieval Europe. It was so widespread during that time that they called it the Age of Faith. Well, we call it the Age of Faith. They didn't call it that. But it wasn't always that way. At first, Romans persecuted Christians, and it wasn't until the Emperor Constantine said that all Christians could practice their religion freely that they became to have all that power under one single church, the Roman Catholic Church. So the church became very organized, and they had all their clergy members according to rank. The Pope was the highest member of the church, and he had the cardinals below him to assist him in what was the church hierarchy. Under the cardinals were the archbishops, and they oversaw large, important areas. The bishops were stationed in important cathedrals, and under them were the priests who served in community parishes. How did the church gain so much power? Well, first of all, they had land. They were landowners, which not many people were at that time. And the land was either taken by force or it was gifted to them by nobles, by higher ranking nobility. Also, every member of the church was to pay a tax to the church, and this could be in the form of money or services or produce from their land. The other reason that the church was so powerful is because they were the very few people that knew how to read at that time. So the language was Latin, and it was the common language all throughout Europe, and they kept records for nobility. They were scribes, so they wrote things down, and so the nobility trusted them with their ability to read and write. This became a conflict, though, the power of the church, when there was a king, Henry IV, who wanted to elect his officials. He wanted to have the power on his own. And so he came into conflict with Pope Gregory VII, and Pope Gregory VII's like, okay, you got a problem, we're going to excommunicate you. And so you will be banned from the church, and your soul will not gain salvation at all. And so Henry IV backed down, and that just shows how powerful the church was at that time. So for this section, you can see it is sort of a little activity where you choose the statements that were true about the church during medieval Europe. So right now you have all the options on the side. So there are 2 that do not fit. So I'll give you a moment to figure that out, and you can also hit the pause button on the video, and then I'm going to show you the correct answers. So the 2 that are inaccurate about the medieval church at that time, it says citizens appreciated that the church did not collect taxes. As we just talked about, the church gained a lot of its money and power from collecting taxes. So that statement is not true. And the other one that is not true is that Constantine forced all Romans to convert to Christianity. He let the Christians practiced freely, but also other religions were practiced freely as well. So that statement is also inaccurate. So now let's take a look at some questions just to make sure that you're understanding. We're going to discuss these in office hours as well, but these 3 questions are really the key points from the reading and some things that you can write about for your medieval time book. So take a look at these questions, and these are things we're going to be discussing in office hours. The next aspect we're going to talk about with the church are the sacraments. And the sacraments were events, actions that the members needed to do in order to have their relationship with God and to also have salvation for their soul after death. So it was a huge part of the church in medieval Europe. Now, if you look at, there are 7 sacraments, and this is kind of a matching activity. And so look to see which ones match up, and I'll give you a moment, and you can also hit pause on the video to see if you can match your sacrament correctly with the action that it does. Okay, so let's see how accurate you were. And I'm not going to go through all of these right now. This is also in the material, but this is something that you can write about, like how important it was for people at that time to gain salvation, and the church using the sacraments to, keep their power in place, but also to have people do these things in order to gain their salvation. The next section is about pilgrimages and the Crusades. So we've talked about the Hajj and how important it is for the Muslim community. And here you see a picture of Jerusalem, and you know that from our discussions that we've had in school that this is a holy city, not just for Muslims, but for Jews and Christians as well. So that one you should have definitely known from our discussion. So a pilgrimage is a way for the members of a religion to show their devotion to their practice and shows their dedication to God. So that is important. And we've talked about the Crusades and how that is a major difference, because that was, unlike a pilgrimage, a crusade is more of a military expedition, and the Crusades in particular to have control of the holy city. So here are 3 questions to think about with pilgrimages and with crusades, and we're going to discuss these in our office hours tomorrow, but just some things to think about and some things for you to write about in your time book. Our next section is art and architecture, and you will probably be thinking immediately of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, because it does show many attributes of this time period. So cathedra is a Latin word meaning the throne upon which a bishop sits. So it is a very important religious building. And when cathedrals were built, they were built with, many of them, with flying buttresses, those stone structures on the side that seem to be like legs coming out of the building. And the whole idea was to make cathedrals look as if they were flying up to heaven. And it also allowed for those skinny, long legs coming out for there to be the tall stained glass windows, so there would be no obstruction of the window at all from the top of the building to the bottom. Besides flying buttresses, there were also gargoyles, and those are those decorative stone sculptures that you see that look like these mythical beasts. And the idea was that the gargoyles were there as a reminder that devils and evil spirits would catch those who did not obey the church's teachings. So that is pretty intense for sure. So, and you've probably seen those in movies and TV shows as well. And of course, you have the Gothic style. We've talked about this when we were talking about our Bernstein unit with the lottery, what Gothic windows look like, and the stained glass windows of many cathedrals. So very unique style that is easy to spot immediately. So let's take a look and see if you can match the four images that go with art and architecture during the Middle Ages. So there are two images that do not fit. So let's see how you do. I'll give you a moment, or you can push pause on the video. So the two that do not match up, you can see there's a dome-like structure, which is later on. And then you also have a statue, not a statue, but carving that does not fit as well. So hopefully you match the four items that we were talking about. Our next section is education. And so writing, I mentioned earlier, was very important. And Charlemagne was one that encouraged the people of the church to read and write, and not just use the capital letters of the Romans, but also use lowercase as well. And we use capital and lowercase still today. So, like I said before, clergy were the most likely to be educated. The students of the church were even sons of nobles who wanted to have careers in the clergy. So there's a little bit of an activity here, once again, to see there are three items that fit, three statements, and two that do not. So which two statements do not fit? Let's see how you do. Okay, so the two that do not fit are the school scholars invented geometry, inaccurate, and the church sponsored free public education for all citizens regardless of class. Nope, as we know, it was for strictly for nobility. So high-ranking church members or high-ranking nobles. The next section is holidays, and you may have known this already, but a holiday comes from Holy Day, so that's where that comes from. And the two main medieval holidays were Christmas and Easter. And if you see here, you have three questions to think about. And once again, using the PDF that is attached on Google Classroom will help you, but we'll also talk about these in office hours tomorrow. So our last section is monks, nuns, and friars. And men became monks because they were either seeking refuge from war, sickness, or sinfulness. Some others came to study, and others were attracted to the quiet of prayer and service that it offered. Um, the person who developed the monastic lifestyle in Western Europe was Saint Benedict, and his followers were known as Benedictines. And they were to give 3 solemn vows or promises, to not own property, to never marry, and to obey their leaders. So that was the way of the Benedictines. On the other hand, you have friars. They wanted to live a religious life, but not with the seclusion of a monastery. So St. Francis of Assisi, who was born in an Italian wealthy family, he gave up all of his money to serve the poor, and he started the Franciscans, an order also known as the Little Brothers of the Poor. So the friars traveled among ordinary people to preach and take care of the poor and the sick. And they were in complete poverty themselves, and they were also known as mendicants, a word that means beggars. So there's kind of the difference between the monks and the friars. So here is another little matching activity, and these are all terms from this section of the chapter, and I mentioned a couple of them. So just take a few moments to see if you know how to match those terms correctly. You can pause the video if you need to. And then the last thing with this section is just knowing the difference between the monks and the friars, particularly thinking about where they lived, what sacrifices, promises they made to join the order, to be a member of the order, and how do they spend their time. So be thinking of those things because we'll discuss them tomorrow in office hours. And also they're helpful for your medieval time book. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Back to the green screen again, and I will hopefully talk with you in office hours, and I'm also looking forward to seeing all the work that you've done on your novel projects and America's time book, which I will be grading over the next few days. So take care, and I'll see you for video number 13. Bye.